Hello, everybody. You are watching Passion Project, and I'm your host, Kat Margulis. And today I'm so happy to have my friend and best-selling author, Marissa Stapley, join us. She's the author of The Last Resort, and her new book is Lucky. Welcome, Marissa.
Hi, so good to be here. So
So
good to
great to see you. So great to see you. I know I've been wanting to have you on the show for a while, and today the timing is perfect.
Yeah.
Finally. So congratulations on your new book, Lucky. I'm seeing it everywhere. You're doing awesome. And I wanted to have you on the show for a while now, as you know, because you've inspired me so much. You and our friend Chantel Gerton, she was one of my first guests on the show. And you guys, we've known each other for so long, and I got to see you. I think I even met you before you started writing books, but you can.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I think I was working at Elevate probably, and I like as a magazine editor.
Yeah.
I was working on like in my office at my lunch hour at that time.
Yeah. And then I remember hearing about you were starting to write, and then you were starting to publish. And so just to be able to see this amazing journey of yours, and like I get so excited. And with you and Chantel, it just really inspired me to go for it. Like this, I can do this, and drop the excuses, and also inspired me to create this podcast, because having you guys in my life, that inspired me to go for my dreams. I wanted to share you and other people in my life like you that really I admire and that inspire me so much. I wanted to share that, and that's how the podcast got created. So thank you for all of that. Thank you for being here today. Yeah, thanks. And so yeah, I've been seeing like so much, publicity. I heard, The Last Resort was a huge success. I saw you in Us Weekly, and your book was in Oprah magazine, and, seeing press releases about your books being optioned for the screen. And like, I'm freaking out. Are you freaking out?
Well, no, because usually when these things come out, like publishing is so funny, and film and TV, because it's months and months later. So at the time that I was freaking out, I couldn't tell anybody about anything, right? So it's always months later when you're like, yeah, no, that's cool, but I'm like living with it. So
Yeah,
freaking out. But I definitely was absolutely freaking out.
Yeah.
Summer. Like,
yeah. It's like everything, somebody would dream about. So that's awesome. And congratulations on that. And shame on me, because I just downloaded Lucky last night and started reading it. And wow, I mean, like, it is so well written. The first sentence, the first 6 or 7 words is genius. And like, I'm a few pages in, and I'm like, I'm in. Like, it's, buckle in. This is going to be a hell of a ride. So it's wonderful. And so this book is about a woman. She's a con artist. She's a grifter. She has a winning lottery ticket, but she can't cash it.
Yes.
And, having known you for so many years, I'm like, this is nothing of what I know of you. Like, I feel like authors, new authors are encouraged to write what they know, right? And I've certainly been doing that. And then here you have somebody who's like a con artist. Like, where do you get your story ideas? Because it doesn't sound like this is coming from your life. And at the same time, she's so well written, and it feels so intimate, that I believe that somewhere under there is a Marissa.
Well, it's funny. And first of all, my first novel, Mating for Life, was very focused on the domestic life, right? It was focused on mothers and children and everything that I was living at the time.
Yeah.
So maybe that's what happens. And it was very close to what I knew. And then the second one was a family drama. And then I think you just eventually, you become more open to the ideas that are just out there waiting. Mm-hmm. So you become, you might see something on the news or hear something in a conversation. I mean, now I have to stop myself. Like, I read an article about Bethany Frankel in the Toronto Star, and talking about being raised at the racetrack and the sort of Downton Abbey upstairs, downstairs situation. I was like, oh my, I'm saying it because I just don't have room for any other ideas right now. I was just like, everything can be a story. Yes. So I think with Lucky, it was a radio report. I heard some radio announcers talking about an unclaimed lottery ticket. It had a huge payout and it was going to expire. And they were saying maybe there are many reasons people don't claim lottery tickets. Some of them are quite obvious. They've lost it. They didn't remember they got it. Sometimes people die and nobody knows they even had the ticket at all. But sometimes there are people who can't come forward because they have to stay anonymous. And why is that, right? It happens all the time. So maybe they're wanted by the police for something. And I was like, oh, that would be a good story. But I couldn't think of the right character, because I didn't want to, like, I know I wrote a thriller with The Last Resort, but it wasn't like I wanted to become a thriller writer. I didn't want like some criminal who killed someone and was on the run. And then I think I was watching like Ocean's 11. My son and I had like an Ocean's 11, 12, 13 marathon or something. And I was like, God, everybody loves that. Like a con artist. Like everybody loves the stealing from the rich, giving to the poor. No matter what, people really get behind that. So that's where Lucky came from. But my editor at Simon & Schuster once said to me, of all your characters, and I still don't know what to do with this, she's like, Lucky really is the most similar to you. And I'm like, oh really? Like, well, I think about it often, and I suppose it's not because I'm a con artist, because I definitely am not. But it's definitely because I do have, I'm resilient and I do have a certain amount of hustle, right? Like that it takes. So that's like where it came from. And then just being open to all ideas. And you do eventually have to go beyond just writing what you know, because writing what you know can feel too personal and really sometimes a little too painful to put out in the world. And with Lucky, I needed to not, like I was struggling in my personal life. So I just needed something that wasn't like to the bone,
Yeah. And I can relate to that. I feel like I'm afraid because I feel like my friends already are hearing this too much. I'm like, oh, that's so good. I'm putting that down. You know what I mean? Like soon people are going to be afraid to stop talking to me, because I just feel like there's just so many wonderful pieces that people share with me or put out there. And I'm going to have a lot of acknowledgments one day. Okay, I just threw myself off completely. But so talking about, you mentioned editor. So actually, let's talk about that if you don't mind for a moment.
Not at all.
Did you always have the same editor, or is it dependent on the book? And the other question I have when it comes to it, like with first-time authors, is like we have to edit the book to infinity and beyond so that anybody will take a chance on it. And I wonder, like, when you've got so many books under you and so many successes, are you able then to just be like, here's my manuscript, and like, catch? Does it ever get easier?
Well, I think it does get easier. I'm not sure if easier is the right word. It becomes more like it's your job. So you know how to do it. It's still going to be like you're rolling a boulder up the hill.
Yeah.
And like it rolls back down again and you push it back up like 5 times and then you have a first draft. You know what I mean? And then your editor comes along and throws the boulder back down and you push it back up. But you're used to it and you know that you can do it. I think that makes a big difference. But I'll answer the first part of your question, which is, do I have the same editor? So I had a different editor when I was starting out. Then there's in publishing, as with many industries, personnel changes happen a lot. So one of my editors moved on, and then I ended up with Nita, which was great at Simon & Schuster Canada. I switched publishing houses in the US, which also happens. Like it's a whole complicated world that, I mean, yes, you're editing your book and you're working by yourself and you want someone to take a chance on you. And I don't miss those days, but when you don't have to worry about any of that, life was, I was in this writing silo. I did all these drafts. I made it so perfect. And I did that on my own, right? Like, and I trusted myself and I did that. Like so when you start working with an editor, you then have to trust them, and it's a really relationship, and that's fine, but it's different. You never write again without them in your head or thinking about your next editor, right? Like it's hard to thing. So I have been with Nita now. This will be our 3rd book, but it's I've had a few other editors in the US, and that's just the way it is. So it becomes complicated. Like more and more people come into the room. So it's really important for you to have developed a faith in yourself that you can do it. And certainly, like the more you get to know an editor, like I'll send in a pretty bare bones first draft, and I'm pretty okay with that. And there may be some
Mhm.
where I'll say, look, this chapter's not even written yet. But this is where I'm going with this. Like, I just want
Yeah.
to think of the direction. And that's something that you can do with an editor who's okay with that kind of thing, you know?
Yeah. I had the chance to see Nita speak at a writers conference, and she
Mhm.
was amazing. And I used so much just from that 1 hour where she
Mhm.
spoke for my
Yeah.
first book. It really, really supported me. So she's awesome. And this book is so tight. Like, I mean, no word is wasted, and there is no wasting time. So
Yeah.
I love this book.
And that's
Uh,
really, like, she's tough, right? But now with her in my mind, like, I'm just like, we're not messing around. Like,
And I love that you share that, because it's so hard to always appreciate the step you're in, right? You're always like, next, next, next. And so I love that you just shared that. Like, just enjoy this moment where, you get to write, for you, and without, other people were thinking about other people.
Yeah.
Which, brings me sort of my new point, which we were talking about a little bit earlier, was, writing about other characters that are not you or like you. Sometimes I feel like, who am I to tell that story? And like, even with like male characters, how do you feel about that, or how do you manage it?
Well, it's like that's a complicated question. Like, it depends on what we're talking about. I mean, there's a lot of conversation in publishing right now about who can tell which stories, and I don't actually feel like I'm necessarily the person to like wade in there, right? I feel like I want to be careful. I want all stories to be told. I'm very committed to diversifying my casts in
Yeah.
as sensitive a way as possible, because I realize how important that is.
Yeah.
I'm always sort of seeking to find people who are the ones who should be telling certain stories.
Mhm.
And so that's a whole other topic. But as far as writing male characters, I did that with Things to Do When It's Raining, and it was really no problem. And it's surprising how, I mean, I really enjoyed it. Have I done it since? Not really. But I felt like it wasn't that much of a stretch. Like, we
Yeah.
are not men, but we know we have men in our lives.
Yeah.
And because we're writers, like most writers are really close observers of
Mm.
people, right? And and empathetic. So understanding how it feels to be someone. So I really like writing male characters as well. And I think I'd like to do it again.
Mhm.
And one of the characters in Things to Do When It's Raining was a young man, like in his 30s, I guess, and one of them was an old man in his 80s. And
Wow. Yeah, that's a
um,
stretch.
yeah, but I mean, it was and it wasn't, like, and you get to know those characters, and
Mm.
you really you get a chance to become them. And
Mm.
I think that's one of the great things about writing, is stretching yourself like that.
Yeah.
But I also think that as soon as you start thinking, who am I to be telling this story, then maybe you need to actually step back and ask that question, right? And be like, wait a minute, if I'm asking if I should be telling this story, then I'm going to have to figure that out
Yeah.
in some way,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? So,
Um, and also, speaking of that, it feels like you've done some genre hopping, right? Like, the first stories were more women's fiction, then the last resort was psychological thriller. Um, what's that like from, an author journey standpoint? Do you feel like you have permission to write whatever you feel like, or do you feel, because you've had so much success, that you need to stay on a track, or how does that work for you?
I think it probably would have been better if I had figured out a track to stay on. Didn't really like, I didn't. So now that I haven't, and now I'm writing rom-coms with Karma too, and now I'm kind of like, okay, I'm okay. I can just be all over the place.
Yeah.
But I think ideally, and as publishers would prefer, that you do pick a lane and stay in it as much as you can. And
Mhm.
but that's a tough one, because what publishers want and what speaks to you creatively is almost often two different things. And that's another
Yeah.
reason why, when you're all by yourself writing your first novel, you don't have to worry about any of this, right? It doesn't matter
Mhm.
what's coming next. You just get to write whatever you really feel like whatever you feel like writing.
Mhm.
I still have always done that, and it's not been a problem yet. But I would say, like, I am a success, but I'm also a difficult to market author. I'm not like, I'm a bit of a mystery sometimes to my publisher and how to, like, who's the audience, because I'm here and I'm there, and what can you do? I just,
Yeah.
you know,
But but it works. And it seems like when you're following your muse and you're following your heart, like that's when you're coming up with the best story. So in the
Mhm.
end, it works out for you than to write something that was forced or something like that, right?
Yeah, or it's like if I just become like the woman who wrote about domestic life over and over and over,
Yes. Yeah.
I probably wouldn't be writing anymore, because there's only, as far as there's only so much creatively that you can necessarily mine in this one area.
And Malcolm it was Gladwell, right?
Mhm.
Wrote about the 10,000 hours. Do you feel like you've mastered this?
Oh gosh, well, I would never admit it if I had. Sometimes lately, I've been thinking, okay, Karma Brown and I are working on our second rom com, and we sold two to Penguin Random House, and there are days lately we're on a deadline for that, and my kids are home, we're in a pandemic, there's a million different things that I have to take care of, and then I'll just sit down and I'll get some writing done, and I'm like, okay, I am really good at this now because I can just do it. Like, there are moments it feels really, really difficult, but I can just push
Mhm.
through and I do it, and I'm like, well, that's pretty good. So
Yeah.
granted, it is the rom-com, so it's lighter and somewhat easier, and it's rigorously outlined because we're working together, so we have to do that.
hmm
I mean, I've certainly put in 10,000 hours, if not like 100,000 hours. So I don't even,
Yeah.
yeah, but like, have I mastered it? Probably not. And sometimes you feel like you start backsliding too. It's writing.
Yeah.
You don't, you never get away from that terrible first draft feeling where you sit down and those first moments, you're just like, this is not good. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so, but I can fix it. That's maybe what I've mastered, is being able to self edit and
Yeah.
get it there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Virginia Woolf has been on my mind lately. And, the idea that to write somebody, a woman needs a room of her own. And in a pandemic, that's a little tricky.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, what's your routine? Like, do you like Karma wakes up at 5 a.m. to do her writing? How
Mhm.
are you making it all happen and fit into your day?
Well, my kids are older now, so they're 12 and 14. So it's, even though they're here and there's stuff that they need, it's starting to get easier. Like, it's a
Mhm.
few minutes, right? Nobody needs to be supervised or anything like that. So I think it's just easier to find more time in the day.
Mhm.
I was getting up early. Lately, I find that hard. I really wish every time I don't do it, like at 6:30 or so, when it's pretty much too late, I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, the day would go so much better if I did.
Yeah.
But I'm not really feeling the early morning. I do have an office. It doesn't have a door. Um, so I'm sort of in a room of my own, but I'm still, I can hear everything. But I think it's just become more like a job for me. Like, I actually
Yeah.
have deadlines. I have to. I mean, it is a job.
Yes.
It's not like a job. It's a job. So I have to get it done, and it is the big dream, right? You're like, oh gosh, all I want to do is get to the point where I have these deadlines and I'm getting paid, and I just have to.
Yeah.
And I don't have to be working on spec all the time. So after all this time, I am there, and I just don't have
Yeah.
any voice. But when I was shooting for the moon with different things, I had to get up in the morning. I had to just do
Yes.
5 a.m., right? I had, because I had a different job, right? And the kids were littler, and I couldn't.
Yeah. Yeah. I recently read Shonda Rhimes's Year of Yes.
Mhm.
And she talks about that creative process where it's like how hard it is to get in the zone, and it's like doing a marathon and then another marathon and you're finally there, and then somebody's like, "Mommy," or your hubby's like, "Can I get you a coffee?" And then it's like you have to go all the
Yeah,
way
exactly.
back. And so, yeah, about the pandemic, you're launching a book during the pandemic. How is that changing the marketing of your book and like the experience of launching a book for you?
Mhm. Yeah, it's been really challenging. I mean, I've done all of the things that I always do in TV and radio and all that stuff, but from home. And that's hard. Like right now, somebody's having a shower and like flushing the toilet. Like I don't know what's going on, right? Like there's just no, it's all just like it's not there's no professional veneer here.
Yeah.
And it's hard to, like, the morning Lucky came out, I was on Global TV here in my office. And I found it really challenging because when you're at the studio, you're there and like you
Yeah.
have to worry that your internet's going to go out or something will happen and everything's on you.
Mhm.
I don't have my publicist with me and all the stuff that makes for brief little glimpses being an author feel a little bit glamorous because most of the time it really is not. So that it's been hard. And I think it's been hard because, the stores aren't open. So what is happening? Like
Yeah.
it's been tough. And I'm told Lucky's doing well, but it's not like it could be. So I'm just
Yeah.
hoping that it'll continue to do well and pick up steam.
Yeah.
When the stores open, it would be great.
Oh, it's excellent. I really, really, really love it. Yeah. I had a question. I forgot it already. So
It happens to me all the time. Trust me.
mom brain. I never lost my mom brain.
You have too much
You've had a chance to interview so many authors over the years as well. Like, do you have people that like you admire or that you look to or that have really impressed you in your journey?
Yeah, I interviewed Marian Keyes a few years ago, and I have to say, of the people who have most impressed me, she would probably be the number one person because she was the most well. I interviewed Jennifer Weiner too, and she was pretty great.
Yeah.
But Marian Keyes was like the person who made everybody else in the room feel like they were special. And meanwhile, I have a row of books here by. She was my like queen of my 20s. I loved all her books. She sold so many. She's this incredibly famous author. And I walked into the green room where I was going to be interviewing her, and she was sitting there. And if you're a fan of Marian Keyes, like she's married to like Tony from Rachel's Holiday. Like she has like her husband, like I swear. And she's like, oh yeah, it's totally him. And you're just like, and he's there with her. Like he goes everywhere with her. He's like her minder. He's this huge, tall, handsome Irishman. And you're just like, these are the people that I'm reading about. And she jumped up from the table and was like, in her cute little Irish accent, and she's like a foot shorter than I am. She was like, are you Marissa Stapley? And I was like, are you joking? Like, I'm Marissa Stapley. And she was like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm meeting you. She had read my book before I interviewed her. And she was like, I love Prince Attorney. I just loved it so much. And thank you so much for taking the time to do this, like out of your day. And like, and I was just like, what is happening? And then I noticed that she was like that with the publicist. She was like that with anyone who talked to her. She was so kind. And sometimes you think like, I'm going to get so famous and like everybody will treat me a certain way. But then when you look at someone like her, you realize that what's really important is how you're going to treat everybody else. And that is something that I remember just staying down to earth and realizing like, it doesn't actually matter. You've got to keep putting out what got you to where you're at. And I have to say, I find working with Carlton Hughes, who I'm working with on the TV stuff for Lucky, he too is this incredibly kind, down to earth person who he is not at all what you would think. And I've had enough experience now meeting different producers to know, again, it's about like what you put out into the world and how you treat other people. So it's always a good reminder.
Yeah, I love that. And speaking of the show, so I'm curious, like, what is it? Is it here's my baby, please take care of it when when it's going to the screen? Are you involved in the process? Like, are you becoming a screenwriter?
Yeah. So I kind of, at this point, I'm like, sometimes I'm like, God, why don't I just like say, here's my baby? But with The Last Resort, which was optioned as well, but it didn't end up getting off the ground. It was like that. Like I was like, here you go. And they hired a writer and he would call me and then he kind of came up with his vision for the show. I thought it was really cool. Like they kept me involved in the process. They would just tell me what they were doing. I thought it was really neat, and I felt a little overwhelmed by it. Like I was like, wow, they've taken this thing and they've actually made it so much more interesting, and it made me feel a little weird and like on the outside of it. I didn't have any issue
Yeah.
with anything. Like I wasn't like, that's not my intention. And I've heard that before, that books are taken and changed and it's just not a good thing. I haven't had that experience at all. And then particularly with Lucky, because I was interested after the experience with The Last Resort in trying to get involved with screenwriting. So I spoke with my agent about that.
Yeah.
Took me at my word. So the next time we were approached about an option, she told Carlton Cuse, well, Marissa is interested in
Great.
screenwriting. I wanted to die. I was like, I can't believe, no, you just give him the book. And he was like, oh, I'm like, Google the guy on his Wikipedia. He's the mentor. Like he loves mentoring. It's all he wants to do. It's like the luckiest break of my life. And he was like, that's my favorite part. If you want to like have a Zoom call, let's see if we can work together. So got on a Zoom call and he's like, hey, hi, like just the nicest guy. And he's like, yeah, I really liked Lucky. I thought it was good. Like, maybe I was like, oh, cool. I like Lost. Pretty good show. Anyway, so now I got hired basically as the writer.
Awesome.
No, nothing.
Congratulations.
Carlton is showing me what to do. So that's been like almost a 8-month-long process of rewriting the same 10 pages because we're in the development stage right now. So we're pitching it to streamers and networks. And it's been really hard.
Yeah.
And like, it's all me. Like and Carlton is there, but he's like, you have to do this. You need to make it more like this. And I'll be like, well, what do you think? Like, should I try this or that? And he'll be like, I don't know. You're going to figure that out. Like, he's just like, oh, okay. Like one day he was like, look, this final scene, like where they're parting ways, like I want it to be more like the way we were. And I was like, oh, no problem. The way we were, like, that's just, the most poignant parting scene in cinematic history. It's fine. I'm like, I guess I won't ask how because I just have to do it. But then I go away and like, oh, he's so right. Like it just needed that old Hollywood nostalgia and figure it out. So it's been cool.
Awesome. That is really awesome. Congratulations on that. That's a big, big win. And what about as well? So obviously you're getting a lot of, mentorship from Carlton, but were there, are there things that, other authors have told you or just like, golden nugget that they dispense that you're just like, this is the one I live by this.
Well, I think because now that I'm more in this screenwriting headspace, I've talked to a few screenwriters and one of them who actually wrote for the Gilmore Girls, which I love, was like, you have to remember that they need you. Like when you go into those pitch meetings, you're not like, please, 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 please pick me. Like this is, you're just telling them what's in your own head and they need you like to help bring it to life. They need stories like this. And that I think is something that I'm hoping that I can parlay to other aspects of my career because it can be really hard to feel that way in publishing and as a writer, right? It can just feel like, you're one of so many other people who are clamoring to be heard. But the thing is, publishers do need people to tell these stories. And we, in this world, we do need creative people to tell us these stories that will sweep us away. And perhaps now more than ever, right? I really wanted, I'm so glad that Lucky just totally diverts people from the way they feel. Sometimes lately where you're just bored and you're stuck in one place, that you can pick up a book like Lucky and you're just suddenly like on the road, right? Moving from place to place and chasing the goal. So,
well, I remember when I heard what this book was about, I thought, I know that you wrote this a long time before the pandemic ever happened. And yet I thought, what an amazing metaphor for the times, having a lottery ticket you can't cash. Like everybody's like, I wish I could travel. Like if I could travel, like, you know what I mean? If I could get on the plane right now. And that's how everybody feels right now. So it's funny because you can't really write to, like trends come and go. And it's like, if you try to jump on a trend by the time the book comes out, it's not the part of the trend anymore. Right. So you can't quite predict something like this is going to happen or write to it. And yet I found that analogy, or that I was like, wow, that was like perfect timing because I bet you that's how a lot of people feel right now.
Yeah, and you really can't time the trends, and I really did get lucky here because
Mhm.
there are a few trends that I really hit, like con women are, a lot of talk about that. It's in the media. I think there's a hunger for stories, not just about con artists, but con women, right? So they're
Mhm.
having a moment. You're right. This perfect timing in terms of how we're all feeling. But I have tried to time cultural moments before, and I know
Mhm.
people who've done it. And honestly, by the time you're like, "Ooh, this is a trend," you're already too late. Like you can't it has to be that you're already writing something and maybe you're already done. And
Yeah.
then that hotel for women, the oh gosh, I can't think of the name right now, but there was a big article in the New York Times, the Barbizon. And I know people who read that and they were like, "Oh my God, like what an amazing novel idea." And in my head I was like, yeah, but it's over. Like it's been in the New Yorker and
Yeah.
now it's or like that actual New Yorker article got optioned for a show, right? Like as soon as it's
Wow.
getting that much attention, you're too late. And that
Yeah.
stinks. So you do have to just write what you feel and what you're drawn to and
Mhm.
hope that you hit the right cultural moment. But even if you don't, that's okay too. It doesn't have to
Mhm.
be a trendy thing.
Mhm. Did you always write? When I talked to Chantel, it's like she never stopped, you know? Did you always write, or did you hit a moment where like, I get to follow my dream now? Like enough putting that off. How was that journey for you?
Did I always write like fiction, you mean? Or
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I mean, I think, well, when I met Chantel, I guess around the time we met, she just published her first novel, and she really inspired me too because I had always wanted to do it. And then because we were working together at a magazine, I was able to ask her questions about it. But I never, since that time, which I guess, because well before I was published for the first time, I had
Mhm.
another novel that I wrote that didn't come out because I was with Key Porter and Key Porter went out of business. And
Oh,
then I wrote another novel and that one was
that's
terrible.
frustrating.
So then I wrote Mating for Life. So it all looks on paper like, oh, Mating for Life came out and everything was great and her career just took off. But that's not how it happened. It was a really tough road to just get to the
Mhm.
first step. And that's
Yeah.
totally normal. And that happens
Yeah.
with everyone. But I've definitely never, except for a brief pause while I was thinking about writing Mating for Life, I've never stopped. And I think I've
Mhm.
added things like the screenwriting piece and the rom-com piece
Yes, so
so
great.
that I can keep doing that because it's very hard to make a living no matter how successful you appear as an author. It's tough to
Mm.
actually make a sustainable living if you're trying to raise a family and live in one of the most expensive cities in North America, right? So you either have to get a job
Mhm.
or turn it into a job by hustle.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Um, and and you had a writing school. Do you still have your writing school?
I do still have the starter. I'm on
Yeah.
a bit of a pause because I have so much going on. And it's hard to know how things are going to go, right? I started that I guess around this time last year, we were in lockdown and people had being interested in if I were going to
Mhm.
teach any online classes. So I started doing it and it was a great way to connect with people over the
Mhm.
past year. I loved it. We had some great classes and workshops and there's still a lot of interest, but it was definitely the one thing that I had to, for now, just pause and
Yeah.
maybe in the fall to offer more classes. But you just don't know, right? I didn't know how well Lucky was going to do. I didn't know that Lucky was going to be optioned. I didn't know, you don't know any of that. And that's
Mhm.
the peril. It's an exciting part of choosing a creative life, but the reality
Mm.
is you can't predict, just not like my husband with his job where he knows like this is the path
Right.
where it's going to go. And
Yeah.
it's unpredictable. So you do have to put a lot of irons in the fire. And if they all ignite at the same time, great. And if
Yeah.
not, well, hopefully you have enough,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, when you were starting, like you said, you had a couple of books before Meaning for Life took off. Um, and in your writing school, what's been, what has been something that you've struggled with, or what do you see are the biggest struggles for people who want to get into writing or want to write a book?
I think the biggest struggle is just the expectation that you start to place on yourself. Like you feel, I mean, you look around and you're like, look how successful this person is, and look how, like, what this person is doing, and look how prolific that person is, and they're writing every day. And so you start to put these expectations on yourself before you've even started. And that can be really hard. And also you expect it to go a certain way, and it doesn't. Like, that's publishing. It really doesn't. It hasn't gone at all how I expected it. Even after Mating for Life came out, like, none of it went the way I thought, because you don't know, right? You've never done before. So I think the biggest thing is just getting over what you think should be happening. And sometimes that can really dampen your creativity, because you're like, well, okay, but I should already be here, and I'm only here. What's the point of any of this? And I think what it does is it takes away the joy of writing. And writing, to me, I love it. I love reading, I love writing, I love being a part of that world. But even I do it to myself. Like, I'm like, well, I should be here. Like, Lucky should have done this, and it didn't do that. And it flattens it. So just, you have to think, okay, why am I doing this? Am I doing this to be for money? Am I doing this? Like, you can't actually be doing it for money. You have to be doing it for the passion that you feel. And you also have to accept that it might not go the way you want it to. Like, it just might not. Like, that is also just the way it is. And are you going to give up because your first shot, like, didn't go the way you wanted? Like, I didn't. My first book didn't come out. I was so close. The publisher went out of business. Like, it was crazy. It happened to Chantal too. We were with the same publisher. And, what do you do then? Are you like, oh, well, I give up now? Like, it's a marathon, right? So you have to keep going.
And I guess to wrap up, do you have any final words of advice for any aspiring writers or authors watching this?
I think it's just so important not to give up. Not like, don't give up on your dream, as I said, just because it's not looking like you thought it was going to look. But also, don't be afraid to give up if you need to. Like, you can't throw everything into this one thing because you told everyone it was going to happen. Like, I had to hit a pause. Like, I told everyone I was going to be an author, and then the publisher went out of business, and then it just wasn't happening. And so I had to get a job. And that doesn't mean that I did not eventually become a published author with the career that I wanted. It just meant, like, I had to have the courage to say, you know what, I can't keep throwing everything I have down this one slide. Like, I've got to just leave it for a minute and go and do something else. And in the end, that was the right thing. So don't give up, but also, like, redefine what you think giving up is.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much, Marissa. Thank you so much for sharing. And so awesome. So awesome. I love it. Keep doing it. It's exciting. I love watching it. So thanks for being on the show. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time.